everybody. Thanks for tuning in. This is episode 314 of the At Percussion podcast. Today, your host and apparently the agent of chaos within the podcast roster, I'm Caleb Pickering. And as always, I'm joined with the ever illustrious Ksenia Komyenovich. How's it going?
Nice. I like this. It's going well. I imagined you like Butters as like, isn't he something chaos? Isn't that like really
Oh,
cute?
yeah, Professor Chaos.
Professor Chaos. That's gonna be you. I'm gonna make you one of those tinfoil hats, and then you can start talking like this.
I don't know, guys. Um, Also with us today is the always outstanding Carly Vina. How's it going, Carly?
I gotta hear more about this chaos. What's going on?
We had a time mix up between Ksenia and Ben and I. It's really their fault now that I think about it, so it's okay. And then we also had,
probably Ben's fault.
yeah.
No, Caleb gave us the time in Central and Eastern, and we said we're going to do Eastern only times. So, yeah, the podcast
All y'all
is a
doctors
mess.
can't read. And then who just chimed in? We also have Ben. Ben gets no
everyone.
adjectives tagged onto his today.
That's fine.
Yeah, so before we jump into our guest for today, a little bit of history. This episode is releasing on, I believe, the 27th of January. And of course, we all know that in 1756, that's when Mozart was born. So, of course, today we're not going to talk about Mozart whatsoever. But something else that did happen on this date in 2018, I believe, it was announced a few days later. Huey Lewis from Huey Lewis and the News gave a performance in Dallas, I think at the American Airlines Center. And he sang extremely out of tune to the point of worry. And he actually went to the doctor later and found out he had Meniere's syndrome. So I thought that was kind of interesting. It's a form of tinnitus, and I would imagine most of us have dealt with either some hearing loss or some hearing damage. I know it's not cool to wear earplugs until you get into your 20s, and then you realize, oh no, I've already gone down the path a little bit. But Meniere's syndrome is really interesting. It's a type of tinnitus that it's an inner ear disorder, of course, but it leads to dizzy spells, vertigo, hearing loss. And it typically only affects one ear. So it really, if you're a singer, it really screws with your internal sense of pitch and the ability to hear yourself. And what's weird about this one is it can start at any age, but it normally happens in young to middle-aged adulthood, which is kind of strange for Huey Lewis to get it in his, up into his late 50s, 60s. It is a chronic condition, and, like other forms of tinnitus, you can live with it, you can take medicine and have treatments, but it doesn't ever go away. But I actually found this pretty cool. There are 4 types of tinnitus. I didn't know that existed. I thought it was just the one. So there's subjective tinnitus, which is the most common one that probably most of us have experienced or will experience at some point. Subjective symptoms are all that come out of it. The sounds heard by the individual are usually caused by exposure to excessive noise. I remember teaching steel band. That's the one that really started to get me after long rehearsals. That timbre just really wearing on my ears, and of course drumline and stuff. But those symptoms typically go away, and they can appear and disappear suddenly, and sometimes last as many as 3 to 12 months at a time. And sometimes it may never stop for some people. There's neurological tinnitus, which is caused by a disorder such as what Huey Lewis had, where you just develop it in some time in your life. You just, draw an unlucky card. There's somatic tinnitus, which is related to the sensory system, which is a form caused or worsened by other sensory issues. So basically another disease that's causing issues, and you get tinnitus from that. And then the last one is one that if you've ever gone for a run after not having gone for a run for a long time, and you get the blood pumping in your ears feeling, like you can hear your heartbeat in your ears, that's a form of objective tinnitus, where you're having a rare form of tinnitus caused by your blood pumping very quickly. But you can get that through apparently cardiovascular issues either. So if you're someone who takes really good care of your hearing and you're a little bit older and you start hearing your blood pump in your ears, you should probably go see a doctor because you probably have a cardiovascular issue that you need to have assessed. So I thought that was interesting. And we got to skip over Mozart for once, which look at us.
Yay!
Yay, death to Mozart. Well, he already died, so it's okay. But our guest, yeah, our guest today is he received his master's in music composition and from Florida State University, his doctorate in percussion performance from University of Oklahoma. Currently, he is the principal timpanist with the Oklahoma City Philharmonic. He is an adjunct instructor of percussion at UCO, University of Central Oklahoma. He's a composer for Attack Wagon Games, which is a big plus for me. He's the director of composition at the Yes Academy in Lebanon, Egypt. He's the executive director of the Oklahoma Modern Music Collective. He's the president of the Oklahoma chapter of PAS. He's on the PAS review team for percussive notes. He's, along with me, a committee member of the PAS composition committee. He has his duo, Duo Rodinia. He is also a percussionist with the Great Plains Percussion Group. He's a conductor at the Oklahoma Composers Orchestra, and he's the owner of A103 Productions and A103 Marching. Previously, he was also the adjunct instructor of composition at Oklahoma City University. And before he was president, he was the vice president of the Oklahoma PAS. It goes on for a little while. This is Jamie Whitmarsh, who I know we always do the thing about like, how do you manage to do all these things at the same time? But Jamie's someone, when I see the things he has his fingers in all at once, I'm like, how the hell is he managing to keep that all going? So welcome, Jamie. It's great to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, excited. So we had a question. Jamie obviously has a super multifaceted career, which is kind of the theme of today's episode. You know, especially percussionists, we find ourselves in these multifaceted spots all the time where we have a lot of pans on the fire. But for those that might not know your specific career trajectory and kind of how you got to where you are, you know, being an active composer, a full-time timpanist, educator, can you kind of give us the walkthrough version of how you got to where you are today, leading all these things?
Yeah. Does anyone have a certain time they need to be gone by? How much time do we have here?
Weeks.
I have D&D in 3.5 hours, so as long as we're done by then, I'm fine. Yeah, I have a lot. I mean, there's a lot that could go into that. I think the thing is that I think the thing framing all of it is this. I sort of had a tumultuous childhood. In fact, a couple of years ago, it really became clear to me because there was a joke in my friend groups that like anytime Jamie tells a childhood story, it's going to be depressing. And like, it became a point where I start to realize as I'm telling the story, I'm like, oh wait, that's not normal, you know? And so I grew up, I went to like 14 different schools between kindergarten and 7th grade. I just moved around a ton. And so I was always the new kid. And I was always sort of in this temporal space where it's nothing predictable, nothing stable at all. And in 7th grade, moved to Bartlesville, Oklahoma. And I still moved a lot, but it was within town. So I get to go to the same school. And so for the first time, I got to develop relationships. And I was in band, and I was absolutely awful. When I was in 6th grade, I couldn't afford an instrument. So I just sat in the back of the class reading books. And someone along the way taught me to read music in general music or something in elementary school, because like a week before they'd give me a school bell kit to borrow, and I would learn the music and play it at the concert. So at some point I learned how to read music. Anyway, so in Bartlesville, I liked music. I had a guitar. That was kind of my first instrument. I was terrible at it, tone deaf, everything. And I really liked music, but I was completely clueless on any kind of life or social skills. As I went through high school, I was playing in a steel band, and I got to 9th grade, started playing the bass pans. And playing with the Bartlesville High School Steel Band gave me a lot of opportunity to keep playing music, to go on band trips that I wouldn't have been able to afford otherwise, because they needed the bass pan player to go, and I was the guy. So they were like, okay, we're going to figure out how to get you to go to Florida to go to Walt Disney World or whatever. And we're going to get you to, I got to go to London because I played the bass pants. I wasn't going to get to go, but they were like, well, we're playing these 3 or 4 steel band shows and we need you to go. So we'll help you, so I got all these opportunities and it became clear to me that I love doing this and that I wanted to do it as a career. Along that way, I was also writing a lot of music. My first thing I ever wrote, my parents went off fishing. I hate fishing. It's boring. I like being in the dirt, but I don't like hooking fish and hurting fish, and I don't like hurting the worms. It makes me so sad. So I hated fishing, and so I got to stay home. And they trusted me not to burn down the house, which was good. And I downloaded Metallica's Unforgiven, a MIDI file of that, and I opened it in Noteworthy Composer, and I immediately added a 4 on the floor kick, and I turned it into this techno remix thing, and that was the first creation I ever did. As I just took this thing and just messed with it. And so I moved on to video game MIDIs and then to creating my own video game music, which was awful and terrible and really fun to do, but it made no sense and it was, whatever. So anyway, I always had that duality of I'm playing and I'm in these groups, I'm percussion ensemble and steel band. Those are my thing. And then I'm composing and I'm arranging and and it was like a secret kind of, because now it's a little bit better. You can be a middle schooler and you can find a composer to study with. You can go to YouTube and search for a composer and find all these resources. But back in the day, you didn't have that. I never met another composer until college. I didn't even know that they were out there. I didn't know people were composing. I didn't know anything. I knew nothing. And so it was like the secret thing that I had. I had a couple bands I was in. I played bass guitar in this one band and then drum set in another. It was saxophone, bass, and drum set. And I did all the arranging for that. And it just felt like I was doing this thing, but I didn't know what it could be. What the next step was. I didn't have any model for that necessarily. So I just kind of made it up and I was like, I want to do this, so I do this. So for me, I think that that's the core of what I have done this whole time is I like doing this thing. I'm going to find a way to do it. Even if I don't know the steps in between, I will start taking those steps. We don't have kids. My wife decided when she was 6 that she was never going to have kids. So my fate was decided then. I didn't know that then, but eventually I learned. And I could go either way. So we don't have kids. We have 2 cats, but our life is music. She's a clarinetist. I'm a percussionist. It's music all the time. And my hobbies are music and musical. I can sit down and compose. It doesn't feel like work. It feels like discovery and play. And it's draining and it is work, but it doesn't feel like work. So all that is to say, that's sort of where I come from. I went to school at Oklahoma City University, came in as a percussion and a education major, immediately dropped education. In the spring, added composition. My junior year, I started teching at Edmonds High School, and I loved the students, and I had a private studio of 17, so then I added education major again. And so I was pursuing those 3. And then my 5th year of my undergrad, because pursuing these 3-degree paths, it's a lot of credit hours, and I wanted to do them all. My 5th year, in the fall, I had my composition recital. I had a multi-percussion duet with Dane Romano. We were freshmen together at OCU. We played a multi-duet. I had a solo piano piece. I conducted a 25-minute percussion ensemble piece. And then I conducted a full band piece. And I walked off stage and I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to write music and I want to play it. I want to go around and play my music. That's what I want to do. So the next day I went and dropped the education degree again. And they were like, at that point, they were like, whatever. They're like, fine. They're like, I'm not going to that's really fine, And so then I went to grad school at FSU in composition. And I was involved with the percussion studio when I was there. Initially, I was not. I showed up and I was like, hey, can I use a marimba? And Parks was like, who are you? And I was like, oh, I'm a master's student in composition. He's like, are you in lessons? Are you in ensembles? And I was like, oh, no, I just want to use the gear. And he was just like, that was the semester they were preparing to play at PASIC. And he was just like, we can't and I had no idea. I mean, FSU is a pretty remarkable percussion studio. I had no idea. I have clueless. I just walked into a room and I'm like, what can I do here? And in some ways it's a downside because you're not always like, you don't always have the context. But on the other hand, it's an asset because it probably got me through my childhood just kind of being oblivious. But it's an asset because there are so many things that you can do that you maybe never would have thought to do or thought to ask to do. And so by just saying, hey, can I do this? And Park's like, no, you got to be in lessons, you got to be in ensemble. So then the next year, I enrolled in ensembles and enrolled in lessons with my first one was with Ben Fraley my first year. So I met Ben at a social gathering before school even started. And I was like, hey, I'm in lessons with you. And he was like, what? And I'm like, yeah. And then my third year at FSU, I was actually with Tommy Dobbs, who was my roommate at the time. So I don't know, conflict of interest. I'm not sure. I got an A, paid the rent, got an A. So FSU was really special for me. And we can talk about the composition side of things in a little bit, because I know Caleb was thinking maybe we could talk about composition training, like at the master's level, and sort of what I felt like I got out of that. I think that would be a good thing to talk about. But for me, OCU and FSU, percussion-wise, like really focused on a lot of different things, and that was really helpful for me. If I'd gone to FSU for my bachelor's, I think OCU would have been a great place because it's a totally different approach, but all really useful skills to have. And you take the things that work for you, that speak to you, and you use them. And so I got a ton out of that. So that's when I was at FSU, we got another composer and I got the Tallahassee Composers Orchestra together. We did 2 concerts. We wanted our music being played. And so we got an orchestra together to play that. And so when I moved back to Oklahoma, I was like, let's keep that going. And we formed the Oklahoma Composers Orchestra, which has had, I think, 10 concerts since 2016, which is pretty good for an all-volunteer orchestra performing some of the hardest music by living composers out there. I don't even remember the question anymore. So there you go.
No, it's fine. You and I talked last night or yesterday or something. I feel like a theme for a lot of us in the past year, and I think COVID was the straw that broke the hustle culture's back. A lot of us, the theme of valuing your own time has kind of come up a lot. But you had a really nice social media post a few months back about how you were stepping back a little bit at OCU. And can you just expand some of your thoughts on that? I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but it was all very positive.
It was. I have a lot of irons in the fire at any given moment. And some of these are things that are artistically gratifying to me, that I do because I enjoy doing them. They may not pay very well, but I like doing it. Some of them are financial things that there's nothing I do that I dislike. I like all of it. But there are things that are really financially advantageous. And then there are things that are like personally gratifying. So like an example is the Composers Orchestra. I don't get paid to do that, and it takes a lot of my time and it takes a lot of my resources. But artistically, it's very gratifying to work with those musicians and to bring those pieces to life. But also personally, it's gratifying because I really believe that art should be accessible to everyone. And that's our mission with the Modern Music Collective, is to really bring people in who've never been to a concert. That's our ideal audience member. And so that one's financially kind of a wash, but personally and artistically, it's really worth it. The problem with adjunct teaching is that there is no limit to it. There is no, well, that's a full load and now you're good and you're going to get paid even more if you do more than that. There is none of that. And furthermore, I have not had a full-time job since I worked at Taco Bell in 2007. Or 2008. I haven't had a full-time job. I have worked way beyond a full-time job, but I've never had a full-time job. So this fall, it was something like a Monday would be 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. I teach music fundamentals. 9 to 10, I prep class. 10 to 11, I teach composition 1, which is class composition for non-composition majors. And then I would drive to UCO and I would either eat or I'd warm up. And then from 12 to 1:30, I would do drumline. And then from 1:30 to 2, I would either eat or warm up, whatever I didn't do already. And then from 2 to 6, I would teach lessons, percussion lessons. And then if I had Philharmonic, I would drive back down to OKC, eat something on the way, try to be at the hall by 7 for my 7:30 to 10 rehearsal. And then I would get back up the next day, 8 a.m., teach again. And so Tuesdays and Thursdays, I would teach at OCU for several hours. Usually by noon, I'm done. I rent an office in North OKC, and that's where I would do my composition, my video game composition stuff for Attack Wagon, video editing, all of that stuff, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, OCU and UCO. And then Saturday, football game. And then Saturday evening, Philharmonic concert. And not all the time, but sometimes Sunday rehearsal and concert, like a Discovery or a family, like sort of like a one-off concert or rehearsal and concert thing. And then Monday, back and do it all again. And this is too much. And if I were pulling in 6 figures a year, then it'd be fine. I can do that. I mean, I could do almost unlimited work. I like all the things I'm doing. But when the adjunct pay rate is just not good, and it's awful. And it seems weird to complain about that because minimum wage is like 7 something right now. And, if you work 40 hours a week at minimum wage, it's like $15,000 a year, which is absurd and grotesque. But that doesn't negate the fact that like I'm in a specialized field. I'm highly trained, highly experienced, incredibly enthusiastic, usually personable, always optimistic, always enthusiastic. I said it twice because I really feel like I'm enthusiastic. And, the net result of my time is it's not worth the energy. Because, we all know when you're teaching, it's not like, okay, I just teach fundamentals for that hour. There's assignments, there's emails from students, there's prep, there's all that stuff that goes along with it. So working that much, it was unsustainable. At the beginning of the pandemic, I started learning programming. At a certain point, I was like, no, just the downside of having involvement in all these things. If it's like, okay, I teach at university and I had a couple gigs coming up, that's one thing. And that's not like I'm minimizing that, because if you're the full-time professor at university and that March 13th, 2020, and it's like, get keyboards to as many students as you can before they leave the building, like all of the chaos that comes with it. I'm not minimizing that at all. But I'm saying it's like, okay, my composition students are asking me, well, how are we going to do this? How am I going to teach at this university? The Composers Orchestra and Duo Virginia and GBPG all had concerts lined up in May. Okay, what are we going to do? The marimba competition, that was our first year we were going to be hosting it. How are we going to handle that? The Philharmonic, the rest of the season, my first season with them, canceled. Everything just dominoes falling. I know we all felt that. And that's one of the dangers of that multifaceted career, is because you never know when the next hit is going to come to you. And it's really hard. So I started learning programming, and I was really bad at it. My heart wasn't in it. I want to learn to program, but not for those reasons that I was learning it. And I didn't want to step away from music, really. And I thought, maybe I just invest in a marching band, because the time investment and the finance, they match up a lot better than like teaching full-time. Pursuing teaching full-time, which is really the drain. Teaching full-time is amazing, but all the stuff you do that you collect to get to that point, and that you have to maintain and keep going, at a certain point, you just have to say, like, you're going to hire me or not, like whether I have this position or whether I'm volunteering with this thing or that, like, whatever. If you don't want me, I don't think that if I wrote one more article in Percussive Notes that it's going to be the tipping point. I don't think that's going to be the thing that really grabs you. So all it is to say, this decision was to step away. I've loved teaching at OCU. I really love the students there, for the most part. There's always students you don't get along with, but I really appreciate how serious they are and generally enthusiastic they are. Largely, there's a huge music theater population, and music theater folks are just like, yes, life, and you're just like, yeah, yes, life. Thank you for that. 19-year-old tenor, thank you. So I really, it's my alma mater. I care about it, but at a certain point, it was just like, okay, something's got to go. And for me, I've spent a fair amount of time there, and it's kind of like clear that at least at the moment there's no real way for me to have full-time employment there. So I need to reduce what I'm doing, and that time can be spent on composing, practicing, whatever.
Yeah. Over the holiday break, I had a couple of things that are coming up at the end of the month from next weekend into the start of February. And I was kind of stressing about them. I was just like, I just don't know how I'm going to get all this stuff done. My girlfriend was just like, why don't you just tell somebody no? And I sent an email that's like, hey, I'm not going to be able to do this. And that was the most liberating feeling I think I have ever felt in my life. Because it wasn't that big of a deal and it would have taken a lot of time. But yeah, it was, it feels good to make time for yourself and prioritize things.
You have to.
Yeah, kind of a weird pivot, but with At Percussion, we've interviewed obviously a ton of percussionists. The At Tuba podcast does the tuba people. And we've interviewed a ton of composers, and we've obviously done, the percussion composer, percussionist sometimes. But I was looking back, and we haven't had a ton of percussionists that have composition like degree training. But could you kind of speak to? Oh, sorry, Ksenia. I forget you have a comp degree.
No. Women are invisible. It's fine. We understand how this podcast is run by Professor Chaos. It's fine. Sorry, I won't steer. Please ask Jamie the well-deserved question.
Well, I'm canned. I'm out of here. But yeah, I forget Ksenia has a comp degree.
Cancel Caleb.
Yeah. Hashtag. But yeah, can you speak a little bit to how your comp degree affects your writing? I mean, obviously seems like a stupid question, but I mean, I write a lot now, and looking back, I wish I would have had more air quotes legitimate comp training as a writer now.
Well, you're welcome to take my composition seminar if you want. It's given virtually. It's not every single week, but it's kind of a schedule that works. It's 10 meetings over a semester. So let me know. But really though, when I got to OCU, this is a fun story. I actually wasn't accepted at OCU at first. I actually don't know. I didn't know this story, but my wife told me the other day because Ed told her. So Ed Knight is the head of composition at OCU. He's amazing. And I credit him a lot with the fact that I'm a functional human, and that the training that I got sticking the way that it did. I really credit him. He's an amazing teacher. But so I applied in like April before, which is really late. And he was like, hey, we already have like 5 composers coming in. Like if you're going to be here though, come to the Project 21 meetings and stuff. And so I guess what happened, I submitted my portfolio, and it was a lot of percussion stuff. And then I, went and knocked on his door when I got down to OCU, and I was just like, hey, I just wanted some feedback on my portfolio, why I wasn't accepted, what I need to work on. And he's like, well, you submitted everything. It was just percussion stuff, and we want our composers to really work with a bunch of different instruments and so forth. And I was like, oh no, I've got other things. And I guess I pulled out like my computer and then like pulled all these scores out and was like, yeah, I got this, like totally clueless. But my wife really thinks that story's funny. So when I got to OCU, I really wanted to write percussion music, video game music, and marching band music. Right now, I would say 90% of what I write is percussion music, video game music, marching band. But the time in between was not that. There was a lot of percussion stuff, and there was a fair amount of marching band, not as much video game, but there was a lot of other stuff along the way. And I think the best thing about studying composition and what it can give to a percussionist working to compose, our instruments are all attack. We don't have sustain. The only thing that we can do with sustain is like when we have a melodica, or maybe when we bow something. And that's it. Even a roll is just a bunch of attacks with maybe hopefully imperceptible decay, so it sounds more even. But we don't have sustain. We just have decay. Even a vibraphone, you can hold the pedal down, it's note, and then it's a longer decay, but it's not going to get louder. You can't hold it there. It's just going away. So as percussionists, we compensate for that because we have to. And a lot of times it's with rhythm. We will fill the space to keep sound going. And that's great. but it's not the only way to approach music, and it's the only way to think about it. And I think I can say for myself for sure, when I got to OCU, of course I was a younger composer, and so we always develop, over time, and we develop our style and our tricks and all that stuff. But I wasn't thinking in those terms. I was really in the world of percussion and marching band and video games. And that's where I was. That's all I knew. So when you write for clarinet, but it's really a percussion part, you start to learn like how to distribute your material to the right sounds of the right instruments, and you start to learn what things you have not been paying attention to, what you have not been thinking about at all. So I guess the number one thing is that you're getting out of what you know, and you're getting into things you don't know. You're also exposed to a lot of music. If all I listened to was Jamie Whitmarsh music, I mean, I think there's some good stuff in there, but it's not everything you need. It's not all. It's like if all you ate was bananas. I mean, your potassium levels are going to be through the roof, but like, you need something else probably. Even a different fruit would be a good start. So I think there's the getting out of the instrument and into the other instrument worlds. There is the exposure to repertoire that you wouldn't have heard otherwise. And there is the collaboration and communication with other composers. And this happened to me at OCU, it happened to me at FSU. I show up and there are composers there who approach things totally different from how I do. Not just the process, but like what their goals are. And what they're like. I remember Al Kovach, that's just how I met my wife. I asked them, I was renting Matt Jordan's vibraphone because I didn't have access to the percussion studio yet. And I told the composers, write music for vibraphone. And Al Kovach wrote a bass clarinet and vibraphone piece. And that's how I met Lisa. And then I, over time, wooed her because I don't know why. Maybe she had self-destructive tendencies. I don't know. But no, just kidding. So Al wrote that. And I was like, this is pretty adventurous. This is pretty non-tonal. And he's like, no, I hear this is pretty tonal. And I was like, what? Okay. So totally different ways of thinking about stuff and just really opening your mind. I really think that I would not be the composer that I am today if I had just written percussion, video game, and marching band music. I really cherish the fact Ed Knight and then Ladislav Kubik at FSU, who's no longer with us, but I remember, Ed gave me all these tools with like material sheets and formal diagrams and sketching and pacing. Like pacing, I think, is the absolute most important element in music. Whatever your style is, anything, it doesn't matter. Instrumentation, genre, nothing. It's all pacing. That is the absolute most important element. If you get the pacing right, because music is a temporal art, it is an experience that we get in time. So pacing. Ed really gave me a lot of that. And then at FSU, I would like walk in, and Kubik, he's old composer. I mean, not like he's really old, but this like old school European master sort of vibe, and totally, different personality. But like I would bring in my laptop and put it on, he's sitting at his piano, and I put, and here's this percussion octet, and he just starts like playing it and reading it on his piano and like talking, and he's like, that's a little garden here, and then he kind of draws some shapes on there, and I'm like, this totally makes sense. Like I get it, the way he's saying these things, it's amazing. And that was also, these are all tools that I use in my teaching, and these are things that open my mind. And so I think, to answer your question, Caleb, the benefit, you're always going to have to find performers. You're always going to have to advocate for your music. You're always going to have to try new things out. But I think the formal study of composition aids you in being more objective and being more efficient, and giving you the tools to really write the music you're trying to write and the music that you want, and to write better music. I think it just helps that. It doesn't mean you have to do that. We all know self-taught drum set players. You're just like, they sound like $1 million and you're taking a lesson in your life. Like, good for you, nice, good for you. Most of us don't live that life though. And so I think training is really helpful to help you write your music. It should be. Not every place teaches that way, right? Sometimes it's like you have to write like this, like Schoenberg, and it's not your music then, So anyway, that's my. I just assume you ask a question and then I go until I forget, and then you'll, and I'm reading the chat too, so I'm kind of like, reading it. Everybody's laughing. I'm like, okay.
Don't read the chat.
Never read
whatever
the chat.
You do.
It keeps popping up. I can't not like autocomplete emails. I'm like, hello, and it's like autofill and I'm like getting distracted. I don't remember what I was trying to say because it's autofilling for me. I think it's great from an accessibility standpoint, but from like me being able to create a cohesive thought, it's very frustrating. And thank you.
Well, from there. Jamie, earlier you mentioned your composition seminar that you're starting up. Why don't you tell us about it? What's the schedule like? What's it going to be like? What's involved? And what was the impetus? What led you to create it?
Yeah, so like summer 2020, when I was like, I'm going to quit everything. And then I was like, no, I'm not going to quit everything. I was thinking about, I teach at Yes Academy. My first 3 or 4 or so were in person. I went to Lebanon and taught for several weeks, and I really enjoyed it. And it was really cool because like a lot of the time in American media, the Middle East is portrayed as just the sand, and that's it. And instead, Yes Academy, I know I'm supposed to ignore the chat. Yes Academy is a program created by American Voices. It's a nonprofit organization, and they have a lot of things: American Music Abroad, Arts Envoy, Yes Academies. And Yes Academies are really cool. They're like 1 to 2 weeks on location. American faculty come, and we have like an orchestra. So we have a conducting program, we have a string program, Broadway, voice, composition, songwriting, piano, winds, all these sort of things. And we just work with the students. We teach classes each day, teach lessons, and then my students will write a piece during that time, and then the Yes faculty will perform it at a final concert. And so it's like a flash kind of workshop sort of thing. But I just wanted to say that American media does not portray the Middle East in what it actually is. And if anyone listening out there, I would encourage you to check out. There's just so much like history and so much beauty. And I go over there and my students are like, "Hey, what'd you think of Endgame?" And I'm like, "Oh, and then we're like talking about Marvel, and they're like, "Oh, I love, this anime music." I mean, people are people everywhere. And so largely it's not very much different from teaching in the States, but there are some things that I really took, and like just talking about the different Arabic modes that I've never been exposed to, and so many things my students gave to me. So Yes Academy, we go on location. I've done it a couple times, and then in 2020 we wound up having to move everything online virtually, and I taught like 4 weeks or something like that every day. I have to go early in the morning because they're like 8 hours ahead. So it's like 6 a.m. to noon, and I'm teaching like 25 lessons, like 25 15-minute lessons or something in addition to my class. And it's exhausting, but I was like, this is great. Like this is really working well. And so I thought, let's see what we can do with that. So I started it actually last year, and it was initially just high school percussionists. And that was the first crop of people. And that was really cool. Because they all have kind of the shared experience. And so now what I'm doing is it's open to anyone who wants to learn composition, anyone who, not I want to be a composer. If you want that, absolutely, we can do that. But it's more about, I think everyone should compose. I mean, I really think that whether you want to be a composer or not, whatever that means, just the act of creating something is going to, just as a human, it's going to feed you. But, as a musician, it's also going to illuminate some things. You get this piece, after this seminar, it's like you get a new piece of music that before would have been incomprehensible to you. And you're like, I don't know what this is. But start to see like what's actually happening here, peeling away the layers. And once you've done that, you've created it, it's much easier to sort of see the evidence of the craft there and know how this is unfolding and what's important in the piece and what's not as important and these sort of things. So it's not exactly weekly. Sometimes it will be weekly, sometimes it won't, and it just depends on if I'm doing stuff with the Philharmonic that day, I can't really teach a seminar, or if it's like spring break or something, but it's an hour and there are multiple levels. So if you are like, hey, I actually have a composition degree, but I haven't really written in the last 5 years, I'm trying to get back into it. Or you're like, I've never composed a day in my life and I really want to get going. Or you're just like, I want to be a better musician and I want to use composition to do that. Okay, in these different skill levels and experience levels, I should say experience, not skill. It's not really, maybe it's part of it, but it's really about the experience level and goals. and separating them into that. And then we just meet on Zoom, and every lesson's recorded, or every meeting is recorded. They're limited to 5 per session because we'll give assignments. Like, so the first one, I'll just little preview here. The first assignment, we do contour dot rhythm method. And what this is it's a way to just generate material, because a lot of what we talk about are writer's block, right? Like, what do I do now? Blank page, blank score. Now what? It's the most crippling thing for a composer. So it's like, get something done quick, you know? And so we write a contour, and then you copy that contour on blank paper, and you put some dots, okay? And then you copy that, and you give it some beams and some X's for rests, you know, and you're just, you know, and then you put it on a staff. You copy all that onto a staff. And then you get rid of the line and all of that, and you tweak it, and you say, okay, I don't really like this interval, so you change it. But the idea is it takes you like 5 minutes, and you've created a melody. And you do that a couple times. And so then we're limited to 5, so everyone can display their stuff, because I think it's so important for people to learn from each other. It's not just, I mean, you work with me and I'm like, okay, well, think about it like this, think about it like this. But if I say write 3 melodies, and you 4 come back the next week, we're going to have 4 totally different people and 4 totally different perspectives. And you're going to be like, I never would have thought about doing that. So, you know, you learn from each other just as much as you learn from my feedback, or from score study, or from writing on your own.
I feel like you're in part of the group. It's like you and Doug Perry, and there's a couple of others that have snuck your way into the video game music scene. And I feel like a lot of people are really interested in it, but can you talk about how you got involved with actually writing and working with video game music?
Yeah, so I mean, my first body of repertoire that I studied, you know, listened to obsessively, was video game music. That's really where it all was born from. And so it's, for me, natural. I really look at this as kind of like a return to where I was always going. And I did a lot of stuff in high school, like on forums and stuff, and like with like game makers and things like that, and just making MIDI files for games that never really got finished. They were just like fan projects and stuff, just to do it. But then I didn't really touch video game composition again until like 2017, I think. It was a long time, like at least 10 years. And I wrote for someone a friend of mine from high school that I hadn't talked to since we graduated, Daniel Parrott. He's brilliant. And I just sat by him in senior English and annoyed him, because he's very quiet and serious. And I'm like, wah! But we're friends. And so he was like working on this game, and I was like, I can do music for it. And so that was like my first real, okay, here we go. I'm writing for a video game now. So it was just someone I knew, and I hadn't even talked to in a long time, but someone I had known. With Attack Wagon, the way that went down, so this past summer, I started learning programming again. I was like, I'm over all this. I'm over all this adjunct teaching and not making any money. I love the teaching part, but the not making money is really hard. And I was like, I really like video games. I'm going to do it. And I'd done some 48-hour film project things before, where you have a team and you write, you know, a film score in 48 hours, or you make a film in 48 hours. I would score it. And one of my students in Lebanon, Mark, who's like, I don't want to say too much about him because I don't want him to get a big head, but he's been studying with me since he was 11 through Yes Academy. And he's just, it's like, hey, write a piece for trumpet. It's a minute. And then like 30 minutes later, he'll send it to me. And I'm like, okay, cool. Think about these things. Now write one for horn. And then like 30 minutes later, and I'm like, he's really with it. But he told me about game jams, and that's the equivalent to the 48-hour film project. So it's like, okay, a weekend, a team gets together, and he's been writing for all these game jams along the way. So I did 4 of them in August, and over 2 weeks, I wrote 4 game soundtracks. Sometimes it's just 1 track, sometimes it's 4 or 5. And I just was like, I'm doing this. I'm diving all in on this, and searched for Oklahoma game developers, and found and got in touch with all these different people, had lunch with people. Attack Wagon, they're a newer company. They had just launched, and I contacted them, and I sent them my stuff, and I went to a meeting with them and talked to them a little bit about it, and they were into it. And so I'm the composer at Attack Wagon Games. The first game coming out is called Scrap Guilds. It's built on the blockchain, so they have their own cryptocurrency token, and there's something about NFT involved. And if you're watching Attack Wagon people, I guess now's the time for you to know I don't really understand that stuff, but I'm all about it, and I know it's innovative, and I'm excited to see what you guys do with it. The team they've assembled, it's amazing. I mean, they have the founders, but they have all these artists and all these developers, and we're on Discord, and I'm always seeing the stuff they're pumping out, and it's like legit. It's like really exciting to see all the stuff they're coming up with. So that's really how it happened. And this game is very 80s inspired. So we have a track, you know, that's pretty Toto, you know, like you'll be like, oh, it's kind of a Toto song, you know. And you can check out our trailer. You can hear some of the Big Trouble, Little Trouble, Big Little Kurt Russell. You can hear a little bit of that influence in the trailer as well.
Big Trouble, Little China? Is that it? What is it?
Whatever that combination of words that is, and Kurt Russell's in there, it's that movie.
Okay. I don't know what any of this is. I was like, Big Trouble, Little Kurt Russell? What? I don't know.
It's a movie about a pocket-sized Kurt Russell that gets in all sorts of shenanigans. They repurposed it as Stuart Little in the 90s.
So that's how that happened. I just reached out and met with him and sent them some of my music, and we went there.
Okay. Well, I would have been lost in that conversation on NFTs if somebody didn't do a segment on that a while back. So
it's confusing.
I have one NFT. I don't know. I was like, this is cool, but
you do?
Yeah, it's like they have NFTs through the game and stuff, and so I have one. But it's a ship, you know, it's like a 3D model of a ship, kind of. It's cool.
Nice. Cool. We finally know someone who has an NFT. That's cool. Good job.
Slight pivot. So your big project in the past few years, one of them was American Biomes, which I saw floating through cyberspace, you know, plenty of times. But can you talk a little bit about Great Plains and American Biomes and how that project came to be? Because that's an hour of music straight. That's not an easy undertaking.
Yeah. So American Biomes, Tommy Dobbs is a percussionist. You guys know his name. And we've been best friends for a very long time. And I was like, I'd written a piece for them when he was at University of Arkansas Fort Smith. I'd written a quartet. And I was like, hey, I would really like to get something that's like one person from every state and try to get like this big community kind of people. And we can be like, look at all these people, like, because it felt in 2019 pretty divisive in America. It felt pretty, just divided overall. And I was like, let's come back to the things we can share and the things we can find in common. So how about, would you be interested in doing a consortium for like and he might have brought it up, I might have brought it up, I don't know. I was like, a 4 to 6 minute piece for percussion quartet with limited instrumentation, one of each keyboard, that kind of thing. He's like, yeah, cool. So we started talking about it at PASIC 2019. And then we're like, okay, cool, here we go. In the spring, we're launching this, we're going. And so we launched it, and then everything shut down. And we're emailing everyone like, hey, and they're like, sorry, my department is gone now. And I'm like, okay, like, obviously, I don't want to bully anyone anyway, but like, you really shouldn't be like, I just lost my job, or like, I don't know what's going on in my career now, or I'm sick with COVID, and it's like, okay, so we're just putting the feelers out and asking, and the one from each state thing, because then it was like, there were like 6 different groups in Alabama who were like, hey, and I was like, oh, the Alabama thing's already gone, sorry, and they're like, okay, and then like, and people from around the world who wanted to be in, so then it was like, okay, we're trying to include people, some of them who don't really want to be included. And we're excluding some people who want to be included. This isn't working. So we just were like, okay, whoever wants to do this, let's do it. And I gave away like 23 of my pieces as part of it. So like, you're going to pay the consortium fee, you get all these pieces, and then you get, it turns out, a 60-minute, 10-movement piece called American Biomes. We didn't make to the consortium number, and I'm comfortable saying that here because, I had this piece in me, I had to write it. And the time that I started writing it, technically by the contract, I shouldn't have even started writing it because we hadn't reached a certain number that we had said. And it was a pretty high number, but like once this number is reached, the composer will start writing the piece. But last fall, OCU ended, we were completely done the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. And then we started, I think, the third week or fourth week of January. So I had 7 weeks straight off. And I was like, I'm never going to have this much time again. I'm never going to be able to dive in with pure focus on one project ever again, probably. So I have to write this piece now. So I had written the first movement, Tundra Struck, which is a little, it's obviously a play on like AC/DC Thunderstruck, which is weird. I don't like AC/DC at all, but I thought it was fun. And it starts with 2 bass drum hits. So like, boom, boom. And so like, thunder. That's basically like a slowed down version of that. So don't sue me, AC/DC, Tower Records or whoever, BMI. So I wrote that in May and then didn't do anything else on the piece until December, and just went over to my office every day and worked 6 hours or so composing. And it was amazing because I had all these charts and all this stuff, and I could just day to day build on it and create the piece. I got done with it, and we had like a kickoff launch event with consortium members to like show, here's the piece, I'm going to unveil it, we're going to play, I'm going to talk about it. And I was like, if I never write another piece of music again, that's okay. I really feel like I write a lot of different styles, and I hope that when you hear a Jamie Whitmarsh piece, you're not like, oh, there's that again, but that instead at the end, you're like, oh, that was a Whitmarsh piece. Like, I haven't heard that before. Like, that's what I go for with every piece, which is very frustrating sometimes because it's hard to find those new areas maybe sometimes. But with this is the only piece that I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much everything I do is in this piece. Everything I love about music is there. Not that I think every piece needs to be like this, but what my soul expresses through music is that piece. So that's where that came from. Iowa played it. It was really ambitious. They played it, and I have an extended. It's quartet, but I have extended parts for the end. So if you mix and match studio members, and you want to have a big finale with everyone, there's extra parts if you want to add in. And Milliken played a couple of movements, and that was really cool. And then University of Arkansas Fort Smith gave the world premiere, the whole thing, all undergraduates. Check out that video. And then it's a piece I'm very proud of, and I hope people study in the future because I left a lot of little things in there. If you're looking to do your doctorate, your dissertation on a piece, maybe pick a movement of this. I don't know. It's pretty ambitious. It's a lot of music. That's all I'm gonna say. It's a lot of stuff in there.
Well, Jamie, you told us how you got involved writing for video game music. Can you tell us about how you got involved playing in the OKC Phil, and was there any learning or unlearning in playing in a new orchestra?
Yeah. So, as you go, I obviously have a lot of interests, and for better or worse, I'm generally pursuing them all at any given moment, like a crazy person. And at a certain point, you're like, okay, I'm not going to do that thing. Like I'm never going to be like, my goal is never to be like drum set solo guy. Like, that's not my thing. That's not my thing. Not that that's not worthwhile, but like, I'm just like, okay, that's not going to be a thing for me. Probably I'll play drum set, but it's not going to be my main thing. I liked doing percussion auditions. I really like the focus you get. You have this end date, because so many things in our field are kind of like, okay, there's going to be a performance, but like there's this sort of finality to it. Okay, and there's short chunks of music, and I get to play a lot of instruments, and so I have this focus. When I'm working towards an audition, I just love auditioning, basically. But it was never my goal, like, I'm going to be an orchestral percussionist. And it certainly wasn't my goal. I'm going to be an orchestral timpanist. And I hope no one from the Philharmonic is watching this. I already have tenure, but still. So just a quick story. When I was doing my doctorate at OU, I was sitting in the GA office, and one of the master's students was like, hey, London Symphony Orchestra has a principal timpani audition open. And I said verbatim, I will never take a timpani audition. That ship has sailed. Because I'd never taken one. I was like, I'm in my 30s. I'm doing percussion auditions. Like, I'm not going to buy drums, lug them around the country to try and win a job. Like, that ship is sailed. We went next door, and Lynn Strachey said, I'm retiring from OU at the end of this year and retiring from the OKC Philharmonic. And I was like, I guess I got to take a timpani audition now. Not to win, just to do it. Like, okay, there's this audition. It's right here in the backyard. I got to do it. So yeah, I took the audition. I got a trial week, Beethoven 5. To give you an example of how not on my radar being an orchestral percussionist was, when I was in my bachelor's, I won one of the placement auditions. Beethoven 5 for the orchestra was on the rep list, and I gave it to a grad student. I was like, yeah, I'm fine. I don't want to do it. We did Rite of Spring, and I was like, I don't want to, don't put me on that. Rite of Spring. Yeah, don't put me on that. I'm going to go compose. I'm going to go practice. I'm going to work on I'm going to go play pieces by the other composers, all that stuff. Like that's, I was like, I like doing it, but it's not my main thing. So I took the audition, got a trial week, Beethoven 5. And I was like, man, I really wish I'd already played this piece once, because I show up my first rehearsal. Risers, center stage, 10 feet from the conductor. I almost had a panic attack. I was like, oh my God, what am I doing here? But, I studied a ton. And I will say that there's like, even playing in school ensembles, there's just a big difference. And I played with orchestras before, and a lot of pickup orchestras. Okay, I played with the Philharmonic before in the percussion section, but it's just different. The timpani, my personality, I know I talk a lot, I'm sorry, and I know I'm loud and all this, but I really like to blend. That's my ideal role, a violist. I would love to be a violist. Hey, I'm here. That's all you can ask, and I'm just going to blend these notes in, and when I need to pop out, I can. Timpani is, there's blending, but like, you're visible. You are there. You're on a freaking riser, in front of half the group. It's like, I don't want to be in the spotlight. So timpani is less my personality, by Ksenia, than anything else. So I had to learn to like, not hold back my power, or whatever you want to say, like some self-help kind of terminology. I had to learn not to hold back, and just to okay, there's going to be a lot of times as a timpanist, I'm a leader from the back of the stage. So just embrace it and accept it. And that was, for me, that was the turning point. And the learning point was, you spend so much time accommodating others, and especially chamber music, really reading the room a little bit. And with the orchestra, as a timpanist, or with the style that we play in, and the energy our conductor Alexander Micklethwaite has. So he's amazing, and he's like, let's go. Like, that's his like, yes, energy, yes, let's go. And it's like, you got to serve it back. So I had to accept that. That was the biggest thing. And then I had to always, and still do, remind myself, like, of course, pitch matters, but it's actually not. I don't know. It's not the most important thing. And I'm sure someone's gonna hate me for saying that, but you can spend a long time fiddling, and while you've done that, maybe the group's pitch has shifted a little bit too, and now you're wrong. You can miss entrances if you're really like, I gotta get the pitch. But the spirit and the vitality and the driving force of it, and the style and character, that's the stuff. Of course, the pitches need to be right, but you don't know where someone's going to come in, and they might be a little sharp, maybe a little flat. There's always going to be a give and take with intonation. That's just live music. So not hyper fixating on that, and working on pitch outside of the instrument more so than obsessing with it at the instrument was something I had to really get my process down for.
Who was it that said it's not a sin to play out of tune, but it's a sin to stay out of tune?
Cloyd Duff, yeah.
Okay, there it is.
I like that one. For some of my timpani students, sometimes it's, well, we got a lot of sinners, let's just say that.
You gonna leave that in, or you gonna edit that
out? We'll leave that in. They're getting better. So Jamie, just before we kind of head off to wrap, you have any upcoming projects or things on the horizon with any of the groups you're with?
Yeah, Oklahoma Modern Music Collective we're really just kind of waiting on what the next step is with the pandemic, especially because it's largely volunteer. So, the Composers Orchestra last year was the first year in a long time we hadn't performed, and it's a bummer, but it's kind of necessary. Video game stuff wise, I have Scrap Guilds, and then I hope to also be writing for the next game for Attack Wagon, Spell Cartel. And in the meantime, I'm just, looking at more companies and more people to work with. If I can get to a point where I'm writing video game music most of my day, I think that would be great. I really, the time just melts away from me. Philharmonic, we just postponed a lot of stuff, and we should be back on stage at the end of February. So I'm enjoying the next 6 weeks of evenings, because once that hits, it's like I don't have a free evening until mid-June, and that's okay. So I guess, I don't know. I mean, American Biomes, I'm going to submit to PASIC and see if we can get the consortium members together to perform the piece at PASIC. And I hope to release 10 videos leading up to it, one on each movement, to kind of talk about, here are the themes, and here's how this, so that way, if people see that going into PASIC, then they're already familiar with the piece and they can really get more of it on a first listen, because an hour of music is kind of a lot. Dua Virginia recorded an album a couple years ago, and I'm working on editing that. So at some point, the Clarinet Percussion Duo with my wife, that'll be out at some point.
Well, we had a little idea for I guess this will be the test preview for a little new segment of, we've got to figure out a name. We'll figure out something sometime of artistically engaging or informative or historically interesting things we've consumed in our capitalist society in the past week. So if anybody has anything, or if Jamie, if you've been watching, reading, listening to anything, feel free to share. But I did see a film that is one of those films. Have y'all ever seen a movie or read a book and you're the only one that's in your group that's done it, and then at the end you're just like, I need to communicate this with someone. I can't keep this emotion hidden in me.
Caleb, we've all seen Don't Look Up.
Even me.
Oh, that was good. That was good wit. So I watched, have y'all heard of this film, La Casa Lobo, The Wolf House?
No.
So it might be the most visually, artistically engaging thing I've ever seen in my life. So it's Spanish for The Wolf House. It's a Chilean stop motion animated surrealist horror film. It came out in 2018. It took them 5 years to film everything. The general plot is, it's about a girl named Maria, who's a young woman who finds refuge in a house in the south of Chile after escaping from a sect of German religious fanatics. She's welcomed into the home by two pigs, the only inhabitants of the place. And like in a dream, the universe of the house reacts to Maria's feelings. The animals slowly transform into humans, and the house becomes a nightmarish world. It's really bizarre because it's actually inspired by a true story of a Nazi cult in Spain, in Chile, that was in the 70s. They didn't get shut down until the 70s. But it basically takes claymation, every form of drawing, charcoal paint, paper mache, 2D, 3D. They basically take every single visual tactile art and it blends it together. And I think that's why, of course, it took so long to make, but things like claymation models that start to turn into felt dolls that go into the wall and become pastels that and just like a really cool surrealist horror film. Yeah, definitely, if you're listening, put the kids to bed before you watch this one. It is pretty disturbing. It's not scary or like anything. It's just visually unsettling. And they go between shots of, the small claymation house and an actual house, but they blur it so seamlessly. The proportions just feel unsettling the whole time. But it's really cool. I would definitely give it a watch. It's free to watch online. It's about an hour long.
Thanks, Caleb. I have one short little thing to add that I discovered this past week. Hopefully it'll still be up at the end of the month when this comes out. But those virtual sessions from PASIC that were supposed to be good through the end of December are still available through the app. And I think they were, this year, just the virtual PASIC stuff was kind of overlooked because it's like, if you're at PASIC, you're not going to go sit in your hotel room and stream the session. So check it out. Go re-download that app and you can still check out the virtual PASIC sessions. That's what I've been doing this week.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Cool stuff.
Any favorites that you've seen so far, Carly, or ones you recommend?
Yeah, gosh, I can't remember the name of the person. Somebody had one on maraca playing, and Nick Toll has a really cool one on cymbalum playing. Those are the ones I've gone through so far, but there's I don't know, maybe like 10 or 15.
When everybody's done watching Book of Boba Fett, new episode, go off and check out your PAS stuff. Well, yeah, thanks everybody. And we'll catch you next time on episode 315, I believe. Yeah, cool. See you then.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.